Staff Sergeant Roy Donovan stared at the framed photo on his desk in the dimly lit barracks of Forward Operating Base Endurance. The glossy 5A7 showed his wife, Bridget, smiling next to their children, Max, 12, and Lily, 9, outside their modest Virginia home. The desert sand had scratched the glass, much like time had worn at his marriage over 3 consecutive deployments. Roy ran his calloused fingers over his wife's face. Once, her smile had been genuine. Now, he couldn't remember the last time he'd heard her laugh on their video calls. Their conversations had grown shorter, her excuses more frequent. 30 minutes to wheels up, Donovan called, as Sergeant Major Willis appeared in the doorway. Intelligence briefing just came in. It's a high-value target this time. Roy carefully placed the photo in his rucksack. "I'll be right there, sir." At 35, Roy had spent 14 years in Army intelligence, a specialist in counterterrorism operations with a particular talent for information extraction and analysis. His ability to piece together seemingly unrelated intelligence fragments had earned him the nickname the Bloodhound among his unit. That same analytical mind now pieced together his wife's increasingly suspicious behavior. On his last home leave 6 months ago, he'd noticed unfamiliar cologne in their bathroom. Bridget had dismissed it as a sample from the department store. He'd found receipts for restaurants in towns an hour away that she'd never mentioned visiting. When questioned, she claimed girls' nights out with coworkers he'd never heard of before. "You're paranoid, Roy. That's what happens when you spend your life looking for enemies." Perhaps she was right. 14 years of hunting terrorists had made him suspicious by nature. Still, Roy couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong at home while he was fighting someone else's war. The mission that night was to extract information from a suspected weapons smuggler in a remote village. As Roy geared up, his satellite phone buzzed. A text from Bridget. "Don't call tonight, taking kids to mom's, bad reception there." Her mother lived in downtown Richmond. The reception was perfect there, another lie. 3 days later, Roy intercepted communications revealing the location of a high-value insurgent leader. The subsequent raid was a success, earning Roy commendation. As his team celebrated, he retreated to his quarters and pulled up the home security app on his tablet, the one Bridget didn't know he'd installed before his deployment. The bedroom camera showed a man's jacket slung over his reading chair. At 2:14 a.m., Virginia time, Bridget entered the frame with a man Roy had never seen before. They were laughing, drinking wine, his special occasion, wine from their wedding crystal. Roy watched, stone-faced, as the stranger kissed his wife. He didn't turn away when they moved to the bed, his bed. Instead, he recorded everything, his tactical mind already formulating the intelligence-gathering operation of his life. When the commanding officer offered Roy leave following the successful mission, he declined. "I need to prepare first, sir," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The enemy thinks they have the advantage. I intend to change that." "You sure about this, man?" Lewis Frost, Roy's closest friend in the unit and communications specialist, looked concerned as he helped Roy set up secure channels on his personal devices. "I'm not making accusations without evidence," Roy replied, checking the encrypted file transfer. "That's not how we operate," Lewis whistled. The Bloodhound, turning his skills on his own home. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I," Roy said simply. For the next 8 weeks while continuing his official duties, Roy conducted a covert investigation into his own life. He remotely accessed their joint accounts, cell phone records, and home security footage. He set up algorithms to flag patterns. Hotel charges, unusual restaurant bills, unaccounted time periods. The evidence mounted. The man was Perry Wexler, a pharmaceutical sales representative who had moved to their neighborhood 11 months ago, shortly after Roy's second deployment began. According to Facebook, he'd quickly ingratiated himself with the community, volunteering at the same school fundraisers as Bridget, joining the same gym. Their affair had begun approximately 7 months ago, coinciding with Bridget's sudden interest in fitness and book club meetings that ran suspiciously late. The home security cameras revealed Perry had been in their house at least 36 times, sometimes while the children were at school, sometimes late at night when they were asleep upstairs. Most disturbing to Roy were the recorded conversations about their future together. Roy will be deployed for another 4 months, Bridget had said, curled against Perry in Roy's recliner. After this divorce, with his military record, he'll be lucky to get monthly visitation. The courts always favor the mother. "You sure about this?" Perry had asked, caressing her arm. "Divorcing a war hero won't make you popular around here." "He's no hero to me," Bridget had replied coldly. "He chose the military over us years ago. Besides, we've covered our tracks. He'll never know about us until I'm ready to tell him." The final straw came when Roy discovered text messages about Perry moving into the house after the divorce. The house Roy had purchased with his combat pay and family separation allowance. What Bridget and Perry didn't know was that Roy's security clearance and specialized training gave him access to resources beyond the reach of ordinary civilians. His intelligence-gathering net widened, and what he discovered about Perry Wexler made his blood run cold. Perry wasn't just a pharmaceutical rep. His record showed inconsistencies that Roy recognized from his counterintelligence work, the hallmarks of a fabricated identity. More troubling were the large cash deposits into offshore accounts tied to aliases Roy uncovered through military database access. When Roy finally confided the full scope of his findings to Lewis, his friend's face paled. "This isn't just an affair," Lewis said. "This guy's using your wife to access something valuable." "Not just my wife," Roy replied quietly. "My children, my home, my life." He closed the laptop. "And I believe he's connected to the very networks we've been tracking here." Holy Roy! That would mean this isn't just about a cheating wife. It's a matter of national security. Roy requested emergency leave 2 weeks before his scheduled return, citing a family crisis. Technically, it wasn't a lie. "Donovan, you've got 30 days, Colonel Barrett informed him. "But given what you've shared about potential domestic security concerns, I'm authorizing continued access to certain resources. This stays off book." "Understood, sir. Thank you." "And Roy," the colonel added, his voice softening slightly, "whatever your wife's involvement, willing or unwitting, remember your training. Gather facts, verify, then act. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment." Roy landed at Dulles International at 3:42 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday. He didn't call Bridget. Instead, he checked into a motel 20 minutes from home and established his operational base. The next 48 hours were spent conducting physical surveillance, placing additional monitoring devices, and coordinating with trusted military contacts. What he discovered confirmed his worst fears. Perry Wexler was actually Pavel Resnick, a mid-level operator for an international organization specializing in stealing military intelligence. His technique was simple but effective. Identify military personnel with high security clearances, research their family situations, then target vulnerable spouses during deployments. Roy wasn't the first. 3 other servicemen had been similarly targeted in the past 5 years, each ending in divorce where the operative maintained a relationship with the ex-wife to maintain proximity to the children. Children who might innocently reveal information overheard from their fathers. On the 3rd day, Roy finally went home, timing his arrival for when school records indicated the children would be there, but Bridget would still be at her part-time administrative job. Max opened the door, his eyes widening in shock before he launched himself into his father's arms. "Dad, you're early." "Surprise deployment change," Roy lied smoothly, hugging his son tightly. "Where's your sister, Daddy?" Lily came tearing down the stairs, nearly tackling Roy with the force of her embrace. Her eyes were wet with tears. "I missed you so much." For a moment, Roy allowed himself to simply be a father, reuniting with his children. They talked excitedly over each other, showing him school projects and telling stories while he made them snacks in the kitchen. A kitchen where he had once watched Bridget and Perry prepare intimate dinners via security camera. "Hey, have you met Mom's friend, Mr. Perry?" Max asked innocently. "He comes over a lot. He's teaching me how to throw a curveball." Roy maintained his smile with military discipline. "Is that right? What else does Mr. Perry do when he visits?" he asked casually. The children's innocent answers confirmed everything. Perry had been systematically building relationships with them, asking casual questions about Roy's work, deployments, and even the security systems he used. "Daddy, are you okay?" Lily asked, noticing his expression had hardened. Roy forced his features to soften. "Just tired from the flight, sweetheart," he assured her. He checked his watch. "Listen, I have a surprise. How about we go get ice cream before Mom gets home? I want to hear all about school." He took the children for ice cream, then to a movie, documenting their time together with photos and videos. When they returned home, Bridget's car was in the driveway alongside an unfamiliar Audi. "Whose car is that?" Roy asked casually. "That's Mr. Perry's," Lily said. "He must be helping Mom with the broken shower again." Roy's jaw tightened momentarily before he relaxed it. "Why don't you two go play in the backyard for a few minutes? I want to surprise Mom." He entered his house silently, his years of tactical training evident in his movements. He heard them before he saw them. Bridget's laughter from the kitchen, a man's murmured response. Roy recorded video on his phone as he approached. "The separation agreement looks good," Perry was saying. "Once it's filed, we move for full custody based on his prolonged absences and the psychological impact of his work. The military doesn't fight these things. Bad PR. And the house?" Bridget replied, "As long as we can show you need it for the children's stability, it's practically guaranteed. Military courts are predictable that way." Roy stepped into the kitchen doorway. "Is that right?" The look of shock on Bridget's face would have been satisfying if the situation weren't so grave. Perry recovered more quickly, extending his hand with a practiced smile. "You must be Roy. I've heard so much about you. Perry Wexler." Roy ignored the outstretched hand. "Interesting. I've heard quite a bit about you too, Pavel." Perry's smile faltered for just a microsecond, long enough for Roy to know he'd hit the mark. "Roy, why didn't you call?" Bridget stammered. "Perry is just a friend who's been helping with home repairs while you were away." "Is that what you call it?" Roy's voice remained eerily calm. "The children are outside. We're going to have a civilized conversation, not an argument in front of them. Then I'm taking them to dinner, and when we return, I expect you both to be gone." "This is my house," Bridget protested. "Technically, it's our house," Roy corrected her, "and I have significant evidence that might interest both military intelligence and the FBI regarding your friend's activities." Perry's eyes narrowed. "You're confused, soldier. Jet lag can do that. 3 deployments, 14 years of service, and specialized intelligence training can also do interesting things," Roy replied evenly. "Like teach you how to recognize patterns, trace financial transactions, and connect dots." He turned to Bridget. "File for divorce if you want. That's your right. but understand what you're involved with before you go further." "Are you threatening me?" Bridget demanded. "No, I'm giving you information. What you do with it is your choice." Roy walked to the back door. "Children, let's go to Freddy's for dinner." As he left with the children, Roy sent a pre-composed message to Colonel Barrett. Confirmation on Resnick. Proceeding to Phase 2. The following weeks unfolded like a chess match. 2 days after his return, Roy received divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. Bridget's attorney, Veronica Slate, a ruthless divorce lawyer known for targeting military personnel, demanded the family home, full custody of the children, and 70% of Roy's military pension. Roy hired Franklin Dela Cruz, a former JAG officer who specialized in protecting service members' rights. After reviewing Roy's evidence, Franklin's weathered face creased with concern. "This goes beyond a simple divorce case," he said in his office. "If your intelligence about Perry Wexler is accurate, your wife may be unwittingly involved in espionage." "I believe she's unwitting," Roy admitted. "Manipulated, certainly, but legally complicit. That's what I need to determine. And this evidence you've gathered, some of it may not be admissible in family court due to how it was obtained." Roy nodded. "I'm aware. That's why we need parallel tracks. One for family court, one for federal investigation." Franklin leaned back. "You want to draw them out. Use the divorce proceedings as bait." "Exactly. They believe I'm just a desperate husband fighting to keep his children. Let them think that while we build the real case." The initial hearing was scheduled for September 15th. In the intervening month, Roy moved into a small apartment, but exercised his legal right to equal parenting time. The children were confused and upset by the sudden changes, especially when Bridget began allowing Perry to stay overnight. "Why does Mom let Mr. Perry sleep over when you can't live with us anymore?" Max asked during one weekend visit. "Sometimes adults make complicated decisions," Roy answered carefully. "But I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and I'm going to make sure you're both taken care of." When alone, Roy continued his investigation. With Colonel Barrett's unofficial blessing, Roy coordinated with a small team of military intelligence specialists who helped track Perry's movements and communications. What they uncovered was disturbing. Perry had targeted 3 other military families before the Donovans, each time using the same methodology. He goes after families where the service member has access to classified intelligence, explained Captain Morales, a cybersecurity specialist assisting Roy off-duty. Gets close to the spouse, engineers a divorce, then maintains access to the children as a step-parent figure. Children talk, especially to adults they trust. They repeat things they've overheard, show things they've found. It's insidious and effective. Roy added grimly, "Have we identified his handler yet?" "Working on it. We've traced communications to a shell company in Delaware that we believe is a front. But here's something interesting. Large sums are being moved into accounts accessible to your wife." Roy's expression darkened. "Show me." The financial trail revealed that Bridget had recently opened a private account where significant funds were being deposited. Funds that coincided with Roy's deployment schedules and security clearance upgrades. The pattern suggested payment for specific intelligence milestones. She's not just being manipulated, Roy realized. She's being compensated. The betrayal cut deeper than the affair. Roy had dedicated his life to protecting his country, only to discover the enemy had been sleeping in his bed, raising his children, and all while selling whatever information they could extract from his home, his personal effects, and possibly his children's innocent conversations. When Roy confronted Bridget about the money during a custody exchange, her reaction confirmed his suspicions. "You're spying on my private accounts?" she hissed, glancing nervously toward where Perry waited in the car. "That's illegal." "Is it more or less illegal than accepting payments from foreign nationals in exchange for access to military intelligence?" Roy asked quietly. "Because that's what the evidence suggests, Bridget." "You're insane," she snapped, but her voice trembled. "Perry is a pharmaceutical representative. The money is from investments he's helping me make. Investments that coincidentally align with my deployment dates and security clearance changes." Roy leaned closer. "Think carefully about what you're involved in, for the children's sake, if not your own." For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across Bridget's face. Then Perry honked the car horn, and her expression hardened again. "The judge will hear all about your paranoid accusations and surveillance," she said coldly. "Enjoy your visitation while it lasts." As September 15th approached, the legal battle intensified. Veronica Slate filed emergency motions alleging Roy was unstable and potentially dangerous due to PTSD, a condition he'd never been diagnosed with. The court ordered psychological evaluations for both parents. Meanwhile, the parallel federal investigation accelerated as Roy's military contacts uncovered connections between Perry Wexler, also known as Pavel Reznik, and known foreign intelligence networks. The evidence was mounting, but they needed to catch him in the act of receiving or transmitting classified information. 3 days before the custody hearing, Roy received an encrypted message from Colonel Barrett. Handler identified, moving to secure, maintain cover until confirmation. That evening, as Roy prepared dinner for the children during his parenting time, Max asked a question that chilled his blood. "Dad, is it bad if I told Mr. Perry about your special computer when he asked where you keep your work stuff?" Roy kept his voice casual. "What did you tell him exactly, buddy?" "Just that you have a locked cabinet in your office where you put your special laptop when you come home from deployments. He said he wanted to get you a surprise." Roy hugged his son. "That's not bad at all. You didn't do anything wrong." But internally, his tactical mind was racing. The locked cabinet contained his secure laptop with biometric access. Nothing Perry could easily breach, but the attempt indicated they were getting desperate. That night, after returning the children to Bridget, Roy contacted Franklin. "We need to accelerate. They're making direct attempts to access classified systems now." "The hearing's in 3 days," Franklin reminded him. "We need Judge Holbrook to understand the full picture." "Not the full picture," Roy corrected. "Just enough to protect the children while we spring the trap. I've prepared something for the court, something that will change everything." The family courthouse bustled with activity. On the morning of September 15th, Roy arrived early, dressed in his formal military uniform with service medals displayed, a calculated decision that his attorney had advised against. "They'll accuse you of trying to curry favor with the court," Franklin had warned. "I'm not hiding who I am or what I've sacrificed," Roy had replied. "Let them attack my service record if they dare." Bridget arrived with Perry and her attorney, looking confident in an expensive suit Roy had never seen before. The contrast was striking. Roy in his uniform representing duty and service, Bridget and Perry in designer clothes symbolizing their new life built on deception. Veronica Slate immediately objected to Roy's uniform. "Your Honor, Sergeant Donovan is clearly attempting to bias the court with this military theater." Judge Alberta Holbrook, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness, peered over her glasses. "Miss Slate, service members have the right to wear their uniforms in court. Objection overruled." The initial proceedings followed predictable patterns. Bridget's attorney painted Roy as an absent father, whose dangerous occupation and multiple deployments made him unsuitable for a significant custody. She emphasized Roy's alleged paranoid behavior since returning home, including stalking Bridget and Perry and making unfounded accusations. Mrs. Donovan has been the primary caregiver throughout the children's lives. While Sergeant Donovan chose repeated overseas deployments, Veronica argued. Now he returns and expects to disrupt the stable environment she's created. Furthermore, his disturbing allegations against Mr. Wexler, a respected pharmaceutical representative who has been a positive influence in these children's lives, demonstrate his instability. When it was Franklin's turn, he took a different approach than Roy had expected. Your Honor, my client has indeed served 3 combat deployments, protecting the very freedoms that allow us to be in this courtroom today. During those deployments, he continued to support his family financially and emotionally as best he could from thousands of miles away. What he didn't expect was to return home and discover his wife had not only violated their marriage vows, but potentially compromised national security in the process. Veronica Slate immediately objected. These outrageous accusations have no place in a custody hearing. I'm inclined to agree, Counselor, Judge Holbrook said to Franklin. Unless you have evidence relevant to the welfare of these children, I suggest you focus on custody factors. The evidence is directly relevant to the children's welfare, Your Honor, Franklin replied calmly, because Mr. Wexler, who Mrs. Donovan is requesting be allowed to live in the family home with the children, is not who he claims to be. The courtroom stirred as Franklin presented documentation showing discrepancies in Perry's identity and employment history. He carefully avoided mentioning the classified intelligence Roy had accessed, instead focusing on public records and legally obtained information that raised serious questions about Perry's character and intentions. Bridget looked increasingly uncomfortable, whispering frantically to her attorney while Perry maintained a practiced, dismissive smile. When Veronica cross-examined Roy, she went on the offensive. Sergeant Donovan, isn't it true that you installed surveillance equipment in the family home without your wife's knowledge or consent? I installed a security system with cameras in common areas before my 3rd deployment, Roy answered truthfully, for the family's protection. My wife was aware of the system. And did you use this system to spy on her? I used it to secure my home and family while I was deployed in service to our country. Please answer the question directly, Sergeant. I reviewed security footage when I had concerns about unknown individuals accessing my home. That's what security systems are for. Veronica changed tactics. Isn't it true that your PTSD and combat experiences have made you paranoid and prone to seeing threats where none exist? I've never been diagnosed with PTSD, Roy stated firmly, and my training in threat assessment is actually quite relevant here. Relevant how? Do you view your wife as a threat, Sergeant? Roy looked directly at Bridget. I view anyone who endangers my children's welfare as a threat, Counselor. The morning testimony concluded with character witnesses for both parties. Roy's commanding officers testified to his integrity and dedication, while Bridget presented neighbors and school officials who attested to her active involvement in the children's lives. After lunch recess, Judge Holbrook addressed both parties. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence and testimony. While I find Sergeant Donovan's concerns about Mr. Wexler troubling, I'm not seeing sufficient evidence that would impact a custody determination at this time. She turned to Bridget. Mrs. Donovan, the court acknowledges your role as primary caregiver, but also recognizes Sergeant Donovan's right to a meaningful relationship with his children, despite his military service obligations. Then, to Roy, Sergeant, your service is commendable, but this court must prioritize the children's need for stability. The judge's preliminary comments suggested she was leaning toward granting Bridget primary physical custody with liberal visitation for Roy. Exactly what Bridget and Perry wanted, and exactly what Roy had anticipated. Before I make my ruling, Judge Holbrook continued, does either party have anything further to add? This was the moment Roy had been waiting for. He turned to Franklin, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Your Honor, Roy said, standing, I have one document I'd like to submit to the court. He approached the bench with a single sheet of paper. The culmination of months of intelligence work, verified by military intelligence and the FBI. The document contained no classified information, only the results of their investigation into Perry Wexler, also known as Pavel Resnick, including his connections to foreign intelligence operations and the financial trail linking him to Bridget. Judge Holbrook's eyes widened as she read. She looked up at Roy, then at Perry and Bridget, her expression transformed from judicial neutrality to alarm. No one moves, she ordered sharply. Bailiff, immediately close the doors and secure this courtroom. Perry stood suddenly. This is ridiculous. I'm not subject to these proceedings. Sir, sit down immediately, the judge commanded. Bridget turned to Perry in confusion. What's happening? What did he give her? The courtroom doors opened to admit 4 military police officers in full tactical gear, accompanied by 2 FBI agents in suits. Pavel Resnick, announced the lead FBI agent. You are under arrest for espionage against the United States and operating as an unregistered foreign agent. Bridget's lawyer dropped her papers in shock as the MPs moved purposefully toward Perry, who looked frantically for an escape route. Finding none, he lunged toward Bridget. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them. 2 MPs intercepted him before he could reach her, securing him quickly and professionally while the FBI agents read him his rights. Bridget stood frozen, her face ashen as the reality of her situation dawned on her. Mrs. Donovan, said the second FBI agent approaching her, we'll need you to come with us as well for questioning regarding your involvement in this matter. I don't understand, Bridget whispered, looking desperately toward Roy. What is this? Roy met her gaze evenly. This is the consequence of choices, Bridget. Yours and mine. Judge Holbrook banged her gavel. This custody hearing is suspended pending the outcome of this federal investigation. Sergeant Donovan, given these extraordinary circumstances, I'm granting you emergency temporary custody of the children. We'll reconvene when the situation clarifies. As the MPs led Perry away, he locked eyes with Roy one final time. The mask of Perry Wexler had fallen completely, revealing the cold calculation of Pavel Resnick. In that moment, Roy saw what his children had been living with, a predator who had targeted them as pawns in a dangerous game. Outside the courtroom, Colonel Barrett waited. Clean operation, Donovan. Thank you for your support, sir. The children safe at school. I'll pick them up myself. The colonel nodded. This isn't over. His network is extensive. The children will need protection until we've rolled up the entire cell. Understood, sir. Roy straightened, every inch the soldier. I'll defend what's mine. The aftermath of the courtroom revelation unfolded rapidly. Perry's arrest made national headlines. Foreign agent arrested in military espionage case. Media vans camped outside the Donovan home, forcing Roy to relocate with the children to a secured military facility temporarily. Bridget wasn't arrested that day, but taken in for extensive questioning. The FBI investigation revealed she had accepted over $200,000 in payments disguised as consulting fees and investment returns, all coinciding with key dates in Roy's deployment schedule and security clearance updates. 2 weeks after the courtroom confrontation, Roy met with FBI Special Agent Diana Walsh to review the findings. We believe your wife was a witting participant, Sergeant Donovan, Walsh explained, showing him transaction records. The pattern of payments is too consistent with your military activities to be coincidental. However, we don't believe she understood the full scope of Resnick's operation. Meaning she likely knew she was being paid to provide access to your belongings, your schedule, and information about your work. She probably convinced herself it was corporate espionage, not treason. Walsh closed the file. She's cooperating now, claiming Resnick manipulated her. It may reduce her charges, but she's still looking at significant federal time. Roy absorbed this with the composed demeanor that had become his trademark, but internally he struggled with conflicting emotions. The betrayal was absolute, not just of their marriage vows, but of everything he stood for. The children were devastated. Explaining their mother's absence required painful conversations that no parent should ever have to face. "Is Mom a bad person?" Lily asked one night, her small voice breaking. Roy chose his words carefully. "Your mother made very bad choices that hurt a lot of people. But she still loves you." "But she helped a bad man," Max said, displaying the black and white moral certainty of youth. "Perry was trying to hurt you and other soldiers. People are complicated, son. They can make terrible mistakes without being terrible people." Even as he said it, Roy wasn't sure he believed it anymore. The divorce proceedings resumed with Bridget in a drastically weakened position. Her attorney withdrew from the case, unwilling to be associated with an espionage scandal. Her parents, devastated by their daughter's actions, still advocated for her, hiring a new attorney specializing in both criminal defense and family law. At the rescheduled hearing, Bridget appeared in prison attire, having been denied bail due to flight risk. Gone was the confident, stylish woman who had demanded the house and full custody. In her place sat a hollow-eyed defendant facing not just divorce, but federal charges. Judge Holbrook, who had presided over the original hearing, recused herself due to being a witness in the federal case. The new judge, Raymond Ortiz, reviewed the case with fresh eyes. "These are exceptional circumstances," he noted during preliminary remarks. "The court must separate the criminal allegations from the custody considerations while acknowledging their inevitable impact." Bridget's new attorney, Martin Greenberg, argued that despite her legal troubles, Bridget deserved to maintain a relationship with her children. "Your Honor, Mrs. Donovan has made grave errors in judgment, but her love for her children is genuine. We ask the court to consider supervised visitation while her criminal case proceeds." Franklin Dela Cruz countered with evidence of Bridget's willingness to use the children to extract information about Roy's work. "The record shows Mrs. Donovan specifically encouraged the children to observe their father's work habits and report back to her and Mr. Resnick. She placed her children in the dangerous position of unwitting intelligence assets. This demonstrates a fundamental failure to protect their well-being." The most damning evidence came from Max himself, who testified via closed-circuit television to avoid further trauma. "Mom would give me special treats when I told her about Dad's work stuff," he explained nervously. "She said it was a game to see what I could remember about Dad's computer and the phone calls he made." Lily's therapist testified that the young girl now suffered from anxiety and attachment issues stemming from the abrupt loss of her mother and the revelation that Mr. Perry had been using her to harm her father. Judge Ortiz's ruling was decisive. Roy received full legal and physical custody, with Bridget granted monthly supervised visitation only after completing a psychological evaluation and parenting classes. The family home was awarded to Roy along with most of their joint assets. Bridget, facing legal bills and potential restitution, received only her personal belongings and a small portion of their savings that couldn't be tied to the illegal payments. As for Perry, Pavel Resnick, he faced multiple federal charges carrying potential life sentences. The intelligence network Roy had helped uncover led to 15 additional arrests across 3 states, dismantling a major foreign intelligence operation that had targeted military personnel for nearly a decade. 6 weeks after the arrests, Roy was summoned to a classified briefing at the Pentagon. Colonel Barrett and several high-ranking intelligence officials thanked him for his service and the sacrifice of his personal life for national security. Your actions have saved countless lives and protected vital military intelligence, said General Harrington, Director of Defense Intelligence. The country owes you a debt it can never repay. I was just doing my job, sir, Roy replied. Protecting what matters. We'd like you to continue that work, the general said. Your unique experience makes you invaluable to our counterintelligence efforts. We're offering you a promotion and a position with the newly formed Military Family Security Unit. You'd help identify and prevent exactly the type of operation that targeted your family. Roy considered the offer. With respect, sir, my children need stability now. They've lost their mother to federal prison. They need their father present. Understood, Sergeant. That's why this position is non-deployable, based here in Virginia. Regular hours for the most part. The general slid a folder across the table. Review the details. This work would protect other military families from experiencing what yours has endured. That evening, Roy sat on the back deck of the family home, now just his and the children's home, reviewing the offer. The position would allow him to continue serving while remaining present for Max and Lily. More importantly, it would give purpose to the personal tragedy they'd endured. As he contemplated the future, his secure phone buzzed with a message from Agent Walsh. Resnick talking. Claims operation larger than we thought. More sleepers in military communities. Can you come in tomorrow? Roy texted back. We'll be there, 0900. Inside, he heard Lily laughing at something Max said, a sound that had been too rare in recent months. Their resilience amazed him. Despite everything, they were healing, adapting, finding moments of joy. He wouldn't let what happened to them happen to another military family. The battlefield had changed, but his mission remained the same. Protect what matters at any cost. 1 year after the courthouse revelation, Roy stood at his kitchen counter reviewing school permission forms while the children ate breakfast. Their morning routine had found its rhythm, lunches packed, backpacks checked. A carefully maintained stability had become their salvation. Dad, I need you to sign this for the Science Museum trip, Max said, sliding a form across the counter. At 13, he'd grown 2 inches in the past year and had recently joined the junior ROTC program at school. Got it. Lily, do you have your math homework? Roy asked, scanning the permission slip before signing. Lily, now 10, nodded while finishing her cereal. The therapy sessions had helped tremendously. Her anxiety attacks had decreased, though she still slept with her door open and occasionally crawled into Roy's bed after nightmares. Can we visit Mom this weekend? Max asked quietly, not meeting Roy's eyes. Roy maintained his neutral expression, though the question still triggered a complex wave of emotions. She's scheduled for Saturday at 11 a.m., same as always. The monthly visits to the Federal Correctional Institution where Bridget was serving her 8-year sentence had become part of their routine, though not one Roy particularly looked forward to. Bridget had taken a plea deal, admitting to lesser charges of failing to register as a foreign agent and wire fraud. In exchange, she provided extensive information about Resnick's network. I don't want to go this time, Lily said, staring into her cereal bowl. That's your choice, sweetheart, Roy assured her. You never have to go if you don't want to. Max looked torn. If Lily doesn't go, maybe I should stay with her. I can ask Mrs. Harding to stay with Lily if you want to go, Roy offered, referring to Lewis's wife, who had become a valuable support system for the family. Before Max could respond, Roy's secure phone buzzed. The line dedicated to his new role with the Military Family Security Unit. The text was from Agent Walsh. Resnick requesting meeting, says has critical information, specifically asked for you. Roy's jaw tightened involuntarily. He hadn't seen Pavel, since the courtroom, though he'd reviewed countless transcripts of his interrogations. The man was serving multiple life sentences in a maximum security federal facility, consistently trading information for small privileges. "Everything okay, Dad?" Max asked, noticing his expression. Roy forced a reassuring smile. "Just work. Finish up, or you'll miss the bus." After seeing the children off, Roy drove to the secure facility where the MFSU operated. In the years since its formation, they'd identified and neutralized 3 additional foreign intelligence operations targeting military families. Roy's personal experience made him exceptionally effective at spotting the warning signs and patterns others might miss. Colonel Barrett, now Brigadier General Barrett and director of the unit, waited in the conference room with Agent Walsh. "He's being transported from Colorado," Barrett explained. "Arrives at 1400 hours. Claims he has actionable intelligence on sleeper agents we haven't identified yet." "Why now?" Roy asked. "And why me specifically?" Walsh shrugged. "Says he'll only talk to you. Could be legitimate. Could be psychological games. You know how he operates." "I do," Roy agreed grimly, "which is why I don't trust this." Barrett leaned forward. "You don't have to take the meeting, Donovan. You've given enough already." Roy considered declining. His life had finally stabilized. The children were healing. His work was meaningful and allowed him to be the present father they needed. Why reopen old wounds? But the thought of other families, other children, being targeted by operations like the one that destroyed his marriage strengthened his resolve. "I'll take the meeting, but on my terms, not his." The secure interview room was deliberately austere. A metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, reinforced walls, and continuous monitoring. Roy waited, reviewing the file one last time when the door opened. Pavel Resnick, formerly known as Perry Wexler, entered in shackles, escorted by 2 guards. The year in prison had aged him. His once charming smile replaced by a gaunt sharpness, designer clothes exchanged for a prison jumpsuit. "Staff Sergeant Donovan," Resnick greeted him with a slight accent that had never been present in his Perry Wexler persona. "Or is it Lieutenant now? I heard you received a promotion." "Let's skip the pleasantries," Roy replied coldly. "You requested this meeting. Talk." Resnick studied him with calculating eyes. "How are the children? Max must be in middle school now. And little Lily, still afraid of thunderstorms?" Roy's expression remained impassive, though internally his anger flared at Resnick's casual mention of his children. "You've lost the privilege of knowing anything about my family. This meeting ends now unless you provide actionable intelligence." Resnick smiled thinly. Always the professional. "That's why they never suspected you were on to them." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's an operation in Norfolk. Naval Intelligence. 3 assets currently active, targeting the Harrison family. Lieutenant Commander in Submarine Technology." Roy made notes without revealing whether he found the information valuable. "Names? That would be too easy." Resnick's eyes gleamed with the familiar manipulation. "I want something in return. You're in no position to negotiate. I'm in exactly the position to negotiate. I provide intelligence. I receive considerations. That's how this works." "What do you want?" Roy asked, though he already anticipated the answer. Contact with Bridget. Roy's pen paused momentarily on the paper. Not happening. Just letters, monitored, censored, whatever security protocols you deem necessary, Resnick insisted, leaning back. We were in love, you know, not everything was an operation. Spare me, Roy said flatly. You targeted her because of my security clearance. The psychological evaluation confirmed she was vulnerable to flattery and material indulgence. Standard procedure for your handlers. Is that what you tell yourself? Resnick asked. That she couldn't possibly have fallen for someone else? That it had to be a manipulation? Roy recognized the attempted psychological warfare and refused to engage. You have nothing of value. This meeting is over. As he stood to leave, Resnick spoke quickly. Michael Turner, currently employed as a sailing instructor at the Norfolk Marina, regularly provides private lessons to Harrison's teenage daughters. Background checks will show inconsistencies if you know where to look. Roy paused, then sat back down. Keep talking. For the next hour, Resnick provided detailed information about the Norfolk operation, and 2 others in San Diego and Pensacola. The intelligence was specific, verifiable, and potentially valuable. Why give this up now? Roy finally asked. Resnick shrugged. My former employers attempted to have me eliminated last month. Prison transfer ambush. Failed, obviously, but the message was clear. My usefulness to them has ended, so my loyalty has adjusted accordingly. And the letters to Bridget, we shared something real. Despite what you believe, Resnick's eyes held a hint of what appeared to be genuine emotion. She deserves to know I haven't abandoned her. Roy gathered his notes. I'll verify this intelligence. If it proves accurate, I'll recommend your request be considered. No promises. As Roy turned to leave, Resnick called after him. She never stopped loving you. You know, even with me, she talked about you, the hero, the faithful soldier. She just couldn't live with the loneliness anymore. Roy paused at the door, then left without responding. He wouldn't give Resnick the satisfaction of seeing any reaction. Later that evening, after preliminary verification confirmed Resnick's intelligence was legitimate, Roy sat on his back deck watching Max and Lily play with the neighbor's dog in the yard. Walsh had called to inform him that Michael Turner had been placed under surveillance, with evidence already emerging that supported Resnick's claims. We'll need you in Norfolk tomorrow, she'd said. The Harrison daughters have lessons scheduled with Turner. I'll be there, Roy had replied, after I drop the kids at school. Now, watching his children's innocent play, Roy contemplated Resnick's request. The thought of the man communicating with Bridget repulsed him. Yet, denying valuable intelligence out of personal vendetta wasn't who Roy was, or who he wanted to be. His phone buzzed with a text from Bridget's prison account. The monitored system allowed limited communication related to the children. Max mentioned he might not come Saturday. Is everything okay? Roy stared at the message, remembering the woman he'd married, the mother of his children before Resnick and his handlers had identified and exploited her vulnerabilities. The woman who, according to her psychological evaluation, had convinced herself the information she provided wasn't truly harmful, just corporate competition. He typed a response. He's conflicted. His choice. Lily, definitely not coming this month. The reply came quickly. I understand. Thank you for not turning them against me completely. You could have. Roy didn't respond. The truth was more complicated than Bridget would ever understand. He'd never tried to turn the children against her, despite the pain she'd caused. Not because he'd forgiven her, he hadn't, and doubted he ever would, but because the children needed to process their own feelings without his influence. Dad, come play," Lily called from the yard, waving excitedly. Roy pocketed his phone and joined his children, pushing thoughts of Resnick, Bridget, and national security to the back of his mind for a few precious hours. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats to neutralize. But tonight belonged to Max and Lily. 2 years after the courtroom revelation, life had settled into what Roy's therapist called the new normal. The children were thriving academically. The nightmares had largely subsided. Roy's work with the MFSU had expanded to training programs for military families, helping them recognize and avoid targeting by foreign operatives. Bridget had served 3 years of her 8-year sentence, with potential early release for continued cooperation. Her monthly visits with the children had become more comfortable, though Roy still maintained his distance, coordinating through prison officials and occasionally Mrs. Harding, who would transport the children when Roy's work required travel. The Norfolk operation Resnick had revealed led to 5 arrests and prevented significant intelligence losses. Subsequent information he provided proved equally valuable, leading to reluctant approval of his request for monitored correspondence with Bridget. Roy had been informed but not consulted about this decision, which he accepted professionally while personally finding it disturbing. On a crisp October morning, Roy was reviewing security protocols for an upcoming military family retreat when his secure line rang. It was Walsh, her voice tense. "We need you at headquarters immediately. Problem with Resnick." "What kind of problem?" "The kind better discussed in person. It involves Bridget and the children." Roy's blood ran cold. "I'm on my way." At headquarters, he found not only Walsh, but General Barrett, the prison warden from Bridget's facility, and 2 FBI cybersecurity specialists. "What's happened?" Roy demanded. Walsh nodded to one of the specialists, who pulled up a series of communications on the main screen. "These are supposedly the approved monitored letters between Resnick and your ex-wife over the past 8 months." Roy scanned them. Seemingly innocent reminiscences, expressions of regret, discussions of literature and prison conditions. Nothing overtly concerning. "And these," the specialist continued, pulling up another set, "are the actual communications we've just discovered they've been exchanging through a sophisticated covert channel embedded in the approved text." The decoded messages revealed something far more sinister. Resnick and Bridget had been communicating in an elaborate code, discussing not just their personal relationship, but Roy's current work, his schedule, and most alarmingly, details about the children. "How is this possible?" Roy asked, struggling to maintain his composure. "Every communication is supposed to be screened." The warden looked deeply uncomfortable. The coding method was extremely sophisticated, steganographic techniques embedded in seemingly innocent phrasing, triggered by specific word patterns. Our regular screening protocols missed it. We only caught it because of an AI pattern recognition system recently implemented. Resnick was intelligent, trained, Walsh added. And it appears he taught Bridget the coding method through the approved letters, building the system gradually under our noses. Roy's focus zeroed in on one particular decoded message from Bridget. Max mentioned ours new girlfriend works in nuclear program. Need name and access level. She's been using the visitations to gather intelligence from the children, Roy realized, his voice dangerously quiet. About me, about my work. No one contradicted him. The evidence was clear. General Barrett cleared his throat. "We're revoking all communication privileges for both of them, effective immediately. Bridget is being transferred to a higher security facility with no contact provisions except legal counsel. Resnick is losing all privileges he earned through cooperation." "And the children?" Roy asked. That's partly why we called you in, Walsh said gently. The content suggests Bridget has been systematically questioning them during visits, particularly Max, about your personal life and work details. Given your position, this represents a significant security breach potential. The implications hit Roy like a physical blow. The monthly visits he'd facilitated, believing they were important for the children's emotional healing, had been weaponized. Bridget hadn't changed at all. She'd merely adapted her methods. "We need to interview the children," one of the FBI agents said. "Determine exactly what information may have been compromised." "No," Roy stated firmly. "They've been traumatized enough. I'll handle this." "Donovan," General Barrett began, "protocol requires—" "With all due respect, sir, these are my children. I know how to question them without causing additional trauma. I've been trained in these techniques, and I understand exactly what information we need to assess the breach." After some discussion, a compromise was reached. Roy would have an initial conversation with the children, recorded for security purposes, with a child psychologist present. Based on those findings, a determination would be made about further investigation. That evening, Roy sat at the kitchen table with Max, now 14, and Lily, 11. He'd picked them up from their after-school activities early, knowing this conversation couldn't wait. "I need to ask you both some important questions about your visits with Mom," he began carefully. "You're not in trouble, and Mom's not in trouble. We just need to understand some things." Max's expression immediately grew guarded. "What kind of things?" "During your visits, does Mom ask you questions about me, about my work, or people I know?" The siblings exchanged a quick glance that confirmed Roy's fears before either spoke. "Sometimes," Lily admitted. "She asks if you're happy, if you're dating anyone, normal mom stuff." "Does she ask about specific people or about my job?" Max stared at the table. "She asked about Laura a lot. Wanted to know what she does at the base. I just said she works with computers because that's all I know anyway." Laura Phillips was a cybersecurity specialist at the MFSU whom Roy had been dating for approximately 6 months. Her work involved classified nuclear defense systems. "What else, Max?" Roy prompted gently. "She asked if I ever see any of your work papers or hear your phone calls." Max looked up, guilt written across his face. "I told her about the safe in your office. I didn't think it was a big deal, just Mom being interested." Roy maintained his composure despite the sinking feeling in his chest. "Did she ask you to look for anything specific or to tell her about my schedule?" Lily spoke up. "She always wants to know when you're traveling. She says it's so she doesn't schedule calls when you're away, but she writes it down every time." The conversation continued, revealing a methodical pattern of intelligence gathering disguised as maternal interest. Both children had unwittingly provided information that, while seemingly innocent in isolation, could be pieced together to form a troubling picture of Roy's work, movements, and associations. When they finished talking, Roy faced the hardest part. "I need to tell you something difficult. Mom has been sharing this information with Perry." "What? How?" Max demanded, his voice cracking. "He's in prison. They've been writing letters. And it turns out they were hiding secret messages in those letters." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "But why? Mom said she was sorry about all that. She said Perry tricked her." Roy chose his next words carefully. "Sometimes people make choices that are hard for us to understand. Mom may still be confused about what's right and wrong when it comes to Perry." "So, we can't visit her anymore," Max concluded, his expression hardening into something that reminded Roy painfully of himself. "Not right now. She's being moved to a different facility. Once that's settled, we'll need to make some decisions as a family." Lily began to cry in earnest. I don't want to see her anyway. She's still a liar. Roy gathered his daughter into his arms, holding her while she sobbed. Over her head, he met Max's eyes. No longer a child's eyes, but those of a young man confronting adult betrayals for the second time in his young life. I'm sorry, Roy said simply. You both deserve better. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Roy sat in his home office reviewing the security footage from their conversation. The recording would be provided to the FBI and military intelligence for assessment of the potential security breach. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Walsh. Bridget requesting emergency call with you regarding children. Advisable to refuse. Roy stared at the message for a long moment. She had betrayed not just him, not just her country, but now her own children, twice, using them as unwitting intelligence assets, manipulating their love and trust. He typed his response. Understood. No contact authorized except through my attorney. As he set down the phone, he noticed a school assignment on Max's desk, an essay titled Heroes in Our Lives. He picked it up, reading the first paragraph. My father is a hero, but not just because he serves our country in the military. He's a hero because he protects people even when it's hard, even when it hurts him. When everything fell apart with my mom, he made sure we knew it wasn't our fault. He built us a new life where we could feel safe again. That's what real heroes do. Roy carefully replaced the paper, a complex mix of emotions washing over him. Pride in his son's resilience. Grief for the family that had been lost. Determination to protect what remained. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of seeking termination of Bridget's parental rights based on her continued criminal activities involving the children. It would be another painful battle, but one he wouldn't hesitate to fight. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, and some risks couldn't be tolerated. The children had lost their mother twice now, first to her affair with Resnick and now to her continued deception. Roy couldn't restore what was lost, but he could ensure they wouldn't be weaponized again. 5 years after the courtroom revelation, Roy stood in his dress uniform, watching Max graduate from high school. Now, 19, his son had grown into a young man of impressive character. Academically gifted, physically disciplined, and possessed of a quiet strength that reminded Roy of his own father. Beside him sat Lily, 16, recording the ceremony on her phone. She'd overcome her earlier trauma through years of therapy and had blossomed into a confident young woman with a passion for cybersecurity, inspired, she said, by watching her father's work protecting military families. And now, announced the principal, our valedictorian, Maxwell Donovan. Roy swelled with pride as Max approached the podium. Neither child bore their mother's surname anymore, a legal change finalized 3 years earlier when Bridget's parental rights were terminated following her conviction on additional charges of attempted espionage. My journey to this podium hasn't been a traditional one, Max began, his voice steady and mature. Many of you know parts of my story, the headlines, the public record. But the most important lessons I've learned came after the cameras left and the news moved on. Roy listened as his son spoke eloquently about resilience, integrity, and the strength found in rebuilding. Not once did Max directly mention his mother or the scandal that had destroyed their family. Yet his references to learning who you can trust and the foundation of truth spoke volumes. My father taught me that we are defined not by what happens to us, but by how we respond, Max continued. He showed me that protecting what matters sometimes requires difficult choices, and that true strength lies in doing what's right, not what's easy. After the ceremony, as they celebrated at Max's favorite restaurant, Roy's secure phone vibrated with a news alert. Pavel Resnick, convicted spy, found dead in federal custody. Apparent suicide. Roy silently showed the phone to Laura, now his wife of 2 years, who raised an eyebrow in response. They both knew enough about intelligence operations to question whether Resnick's former handlers had finally reached him, tying up a loose end that had outlived its usefulness. "Everything okay, Dad?" Max asked, noticing the exchange. "Nothing concerning us anymore," Roy replied, putting the phone away. "Just work." That evening, as Max packed for the military academy where he'd begin training in the fall, following his father's footsteps but choosing the Air Force Cybersecurity Division rather than Army Intelligence, Roy received another alert. B. Donovan requesting final communication through counsel, claims critical information regarding ours network. Roy deleted the message without response. Bridget had made similar claims 3 times in the past 5 years, each time offering fragments of information in exchange for reduced restrictions or visitation rights. Each time the intelligence proved minimal or outdated while her motives remained manipulative. The children hadn't seen their mother in over 3 years, since the revelation of her continued intelligence gathering through them. Max had made a clean break, refusing all contact. Lily had maintained sporadic, supervised written communication until her 16th birthday, when she too had decided to end contact. "Dad?" Lily appeared in his office doorway. "Can we talk?" "Always." Roy cleared space at his desk where he'd been reviewing Max's academy paperwork. Lily sat, fidgeting slightly. "Mom's lawyer sent me an email. She wants to see me before I start college next year. Says she has important things to tell me that can only be said in person." Roy kept his expression neutral. "What do you think about that?" "I think she's still trying to manipulate us." Lily's voice held a maturity beyond her years, but she added, "Part of me wonders if I should hear her out just to finally close that chapter." "That's your decision, Lily. You're old enough to make it for yourself." Roy chose his next words carefully. "But remember, closure doesn't always come from external sources. Sometimes we find it within ourselves." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "You never got closure with her, did you?" "I found my own version of it," Roy answered honestly. "By focusing on what I could control, creating a safe home for you and Max, doing meaningful work, building a life based on truth rather than lies. Do you ever regret how things turned out? Not forgiving her?" Roy considered the question seriously. "I've never regretted protecting you and Max. As for forgiveness, some betrayals go too deep, affect too many innocent people. Your mother didn't just betray me. She betrayed you, Max, her country, and ultimately herself. And that's unforgivable for me. Yes, but your journey is your own. Forgiveness isn't an obligation. It's a choice each person must make for themselves based on their own values and boundaries." Lily was quiet for a moment. "I think I'll decline the meeting. Not because I can't forgive her, but because I don't believe her motives have changed, and I won't let myself be used again." Roy felt a profound mixture of sadness and pride. Sad that his daughter had to learn such hard lessons so young. Proud of the wisdom and strength she'd developed as a result. Later that night, with the children asleep and Laura reading beside him in bed, Roy contemplated the journey of the past 5 years. The intelligence network Resnick had been part of had been largely dismantled. The MFSU had expanded to protect military families worldwide. The work continued as it always would, new threats emerging as old ones faded. "Penny, for your thoughts," Laura said, setting aside her book. "Just reflecting," Roy replied. Max heading to the academy. Lily making her own decisions about Bridget. The fortress stands. Laura understood the reference. Early in their recovery, Roy had described his approach to rebuilding their family life as constructing a fortress. Not to hide within, but to create a secure foundation from which the children could safely engage with the world. You've given them something remarkable, Roy. Not just protection, but the tools to protect themselves. We all have, he corrected, including her in the achievement. Laura had been instrumental in helping the children heal, bringing warmth and stability while respecting the complex emotions surrounding their mother. His phone buzzed once more, the final update he'd been waiting for. The message was brief. B. Donovan. Transfer complete. Maximum security communications blackout implemented per court order. Roy set the phone aside without comment. Bridget had made her choices, repeatedly. Now she would live with the consequences, permanently isolated from the family she had betrayed and the children she had attempted to exploit. The legal battle to terminate all contact had been brutal but necessary, with the court ultimately agreeing that her continued manipulation represented an ongoing threat to both the children's well-being and national security. In the morning, Roy would help Max load his car for the academy. In the fall, he would see Lily begin her senior year of high school. Their lives would continue to unfold, shaped by, but not defined by, the betrayals of the past. The fortress he had built around his family wasn't comprised of walls, but of truth, transparency, and unwavering principles. Within its boundaries, his children had found not just safety, but the strength to forge their own paths. Outside its protection, those who had chosen deception over loyalty, manipulation over love, would find no quarter, no forgiveness, no return. Some might call him unforgiving. Roy considered it clarity of purpose. The enemy had breached his home once, using those he loved as weapons against all he stood for. That breach had been sealed, the damage repaired, the lessons learned. Never again.